All right, we're recording. So tonight we are covering PHP. And let me share the screen. Okay, so there were some questions because it looks like somebody had some issues with this. So I will actually just walk you through it. And what you need to do is that screenshot, and I'll show you everything you have to do. And then we will start lecture on the PHP introduction W3. It's actually pretty cool. So let me stop share because I need to launch Visual Studio. And then once that's up, I will share the screen with you. You're getting hail over there now. Well, I'm not getting hail. It's very gray. Yesterday was weird though. We got like sideways kind of sleet, and then we got really fat snowflakes, and then it went from there. Okay. And sometimes when you jump screens on Visual Studio, when you're opening new projects, it doesn't show. So if it suddenly stops showing what I'm doing, please let me know. All right, so here's your very first startup screen after you've gotten it started. Let's just do continue without code. And of course, it kicks me straight out. At least it told me. So this is how I found out where the extensions were. So you click up there on extensions, manage extensions. You guys seeing that? Okay. And stop. Yes, okay. And then up here on the right, you see a little search box. Make sure that you're selected on online. Then type in that search box, PHP, and hit enter. And that's where I found the PHP tools for Visual Studio 2022. Now, mine's got a check mark next to it because it's already installed, so I can't run you through the exact thing. But when you first do it, you see where it says close? There's a thing that you click on it and say, yes, I want to install this. And then it'll say, next time you shut down, it'll install. So you have to close out of Visual Studio and it'll start up the little installer. Okay, does that make sense so far? So it'll chug along. Okay, so it'll chug along and it'll install that PHP tools for Visual Studio. And then I'll have to relaunch here. It'll relaunch it once it's installed. And then you'll come back up to that get started screen, this screen. And then for your first one, we want to do the create new project, that one right there. And there is a search bar up here. So type in PHP and hit enter. Nope, that's not what I want you to do. Hold on, it's trying to, there we go. And then PHP web project is what you're going to want. Now, the first time you run this, I've already run this, so it'll look different. The first time you run it, it'll take a second because it'll be like, we need to install whatever the default, I think it's 8.2 of PHP. And then you say, yes, let's install PHP 8.2. And then it'll say, hey, do you know this is only a trial, you have to buy it, but it's a trial for 30 days. So you have 30 days to play around with this particular one. And there are other ones that we can do too. But I just thought you would like to be able to see this because it actually shows you some of the stuff. Because you can use this with IIS or Azure. So anyway, so web project, next, just whatever you want it to be named. And then let me reshare because it kicked me out again. Then you have these project templates. Don't do any of the other ones like CMS or you can if you want to play with them. But for the generic stuff that we're learning, the empty website is perfectly fine. Make sure that you've got it. I'm doing everything on the most recent PHP, which is 8.2, and then hit finish. And it'll take me a second. And you should see this screen. This is what I want the print screen of. Now, don't just take a print screen of mine because I will look at these. Now, over here on the right, you'll see all of your stuff. Here's your index PHP and your generic echo that starts up with that. So this is all that I'm talking about. That's all you need to do. Now, when you're going through some of those videos, he does use some different tools, and I think all of them are free tools that you can use. So go crazy, install whatever you want to. It's just about what you can use to make it more understandable for you. So, are there any questions about that before I get over to the W3 and some of the guides? No questions. Okay, makes more sense. Good. All right,
We now have the video, so we should be good.
Yep, you should be. You can go back and watch this. And those of you that were paying attention can remember, hey, we can go watch this. All right, let me switch over to the web. All right, first we're going to look at our deliverables. Now, I do not expect you to read everything word from word on this PHP programming cookbook. However, it does have some really good information. That'll be a little bit easier for you guys to see. So a little bit, one more. And it's got a nice linkable introduction. What I do when I look through these, especially when I've gotten them nice broken out like this, I just start going through the different sections. So the nice thing that I like about this one is these right here. They have some very good full examples of PHP, not just theory. They actually put the whole thing out there for you guys. Please don't. Yes, I suppose you could, but please make your own, because I might make you show me. I could be really mean and make you remotely show me on yours. So don't forget, I can do that. Anyway, so they have a lot of examples where they have this information. And that's one of the reasons I liked this, because they have all these little snippets in there that show you all this stuff. So I like books like this because no matter what I choose to go over, there's a good chance that I will miss something that you're like, shoot, there's got to be an easier way that will click with me. And you can always go out and look at this and then go, oh, hey, you know what? This is something that I like better. So PHP is quite easy to do that with. Now, for the different weeks, I'm going to show you, since we tend to, I break it up in 3-week chunks. So for this first week, we have our easy 20 points. And I highly suggest you go look at this guy's videos. He's got a ton more in there than what I actually put on. These are just some of the beginner stuff. Then week 8, he has, these are his variables, built-in super global variables, and it will go over all those too. And this one is just like an example. It's kind of, do you remember how we've been doing our setups for our things? So we have our super simple one, and then we have what's kind of like doing word problems for the second one. So that's what this one is. And as we go through today, you'll kind of understand what this means. And then on the third week, now the nice thing about this for the third week is there is also some pre-built stuff that'll help you on your third week one. You're building a contact us website form. Now you can always throw that in to work with your previous HTML, because PHP stuff is made to work with HTML, which is why I chose to do this after you guys have done MySQL and HTML, because it works with both of them. So these are basically the things that you need in this one. The contact us form, the form, the script, the header, the footer. Well, guess what? There's the form, and here's the shell thing for doing that. So there's stuff there for you. Exactly. There's stuff there for you to do. You just have to go out and make sure everything is put together correctly. So this one is not as painful as it could have been. So hopefully that helps take a little bit of the anxiety that comes from programming of any sort. Since this one's learning PHP is kind of like taking all the stuff that we've learned and then smashing it in there too. No, Kitty. Yes, I love you. I know, I love you. You don't need to stand on my keyboard. So
Professor Anna, I had a question.
yes.
So I was discussing this with some of the other students, but when I was using Visual Studio, it would like red underline var char values that I would submit, and then it would basically only work if I took out parentheses around the values, and it would just, I don't know, whatever I was doing, I don't know if I was just using it wrong, or maybe I had a feature on that was just, it felt wrong when I was doing it, and I know we were supposed to use parentheses and stuff like that, but I was following with the Visual Studio, and maybe, I don't know, you can elaborate as to why it was doing that for me.
I would have to, we can always do a screen share if you want to show me what it's doing. A lot of the times with those, what it's flailing around about is you have to have previously created and done a lot of the database stuff before it sees how to do it. And then it goes, are you really supposed to be? It's kind of an odd duality when you're dumping the code in there. So if after we do the lecture tonight, if you want to stick around and we can do a screen share and you can show me what you're talking about.
I mean, I already submitted the assignment, and I was like, maybe, I'm doing something wrong with Visual Studio, so I just kind of just took the L on just making sure it looked good on Visual Studio, and I just submitted it. So I just accepted the fact that it wasn't, as long as I didn't see a lot of red on there, I thought I was good. So
Okay.
I was like, maybe I'm just an idiot, and
no, I think
so I just took the loss there.
Part of the problem is that when you're doing scripting, you have to do it in chunks, and the way that Visual Studio is set up is there's some graphical interfacing that you have to do to set things up, and if you haven't done that first, sometimes it incorrectly underlines things because it's not seeing the connection between what it thinks is a pre-made database and what you have in your script.
Yeah, I was going from like just straight code. I wasn't really doing any.
And that's why I mean I like you guys to learn in straight code first, because then I believe that learning in straight code, it's kind of like learning to walk before you run, because that way you can go back and backtrace instead of going, well, crap, I don't know what this actually means, which happens to a lot of people if they don't learn the code first. So no, I'll go back and look at yours for sure. I was going through them and grading them, but when you're doing a whole bunch of them at one time, I can't remember yours specifically. So
Mine was probably the worst one. So just you probably haven't gotten it to it yet.
Okay, well, we can talk about it after, but yeah, no, I think a lot of it is when you're just doing pure text scripting and you're working with something like that. It has some options where it gets confused even though you're actually doing the language correctly. But okay, onward to PHP. Now this one is the nice thing about this one, because the MySQL The way that it ran when you were doing stuff, there was so much back end that you really had to add in, which is kind of the hard part of teaching beginner MySQL. You just kind of have to, here's a shotgun and here's how you kind of aim it in the right direction. But this one I think would be a little bit easier for you guys to understand some of. So we already know a little bit of HTML, a little bit of CSS. Don't worry too much about the JavaScript. We're not going to be doing anything super heavy in that. But I will talk to you about sections if we have anything that crosses over that and you're like, what the heck is that? Okay, so PHP. So that one's hypertext processor. It's widely used open source scripting language. The scripts are executed on the server and the PHP is free to download and use, which is why you still see a lot of PHP out there. They can contain text, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP code. The code's executed on the server and the results are returned back to the browser as plain text. And the PHP files have that .php extension. So what can it do? It can generate dynamic page content, create, open, read, write, delete, and close files on a server, collect form data, send and receive cookies, add, delete, modify data in a database, can be used to control user access and encrypt data. However, PHP encryption is not as high as some of the other options are, but it is still widely used enough that it's something you guys should be aware of, just because you're probably going to run into it. I didn't think I would, but it was actually one of my first problem children, was because a lot of education places still like to use WordPress sites for some reason. And we're actually using 8.2. There's you need MySQL and stuff. It's already should be in your Visual Studios. So the basic PHP syntax or PHP script, you can see that part right here is your beginning and there's your ender. So it's kind of like when we did HTML, and then your code goes in between that. And then when you're putting it in an HTML document, you can see you've got it down here in the body of the document. So this is what this looks like. Okay, sorry, Tackle Cat. So echo, right there, you're going to see this one used a lot. Echo, and then it'll have like commands and things like that after it. Echo is what you're telling it to do. Basically, it's like your output. So if we change anything between these quote marks, you can see it changes the message right there. So case sensitivity in PHP, keywords, classes, functions, and user-defined functions are not case sensitive. In the example below, you can see all three echo statements. They're all exactly the same thing. Personally, I think it's best some people like to use all caps just so that it's easier for them to see it. Some people like to use all lowercase. Please don't do the mix and match. For those of us who have to go back and read your code, it makes us it's infuriating trying to read it. It's not case sensitive, no. It's more of a style preference. Some people, they just learned how to do it lowercase. Some people, I've seen a lot of people that do uppercase just so that it's easier to see. Exactly. Yeah, please don't do that. It's kind of, it's as you can see, it's very difficult to read, especially if you're trying to speed read through code, and it will cause the person who's speed reading to go when they're trying to read, and it's like having a visual stutter when you're trying to read through code. So as you can see, the end results don't matter on those that can be uppercase, lowercase, or mixed. I suggest that you choose one and stick with it. My smart aleck students. So here, these are keywords they're talking about. Are not, like user defined, are not case sensitive. However, variable names are case sensitive. So you can see the names here. Those are. And then if you put in these, and you are expecting them to be exactly the same, when you change that, it will think, oh, you're actually talking about 3 different things, because you aren't keeping them the same. It doesn't particularly care which one it is, but once you get through that first one, it's like, hey, wait a minute, I'm expecting this. So only the first one will do color, because that's a variable, and then the other ones are not treated the same way because they are variables and they are case sensitive. So this one I talked about a couple of times here. So do you guys remember what that missing part is? Yes, good job, echo. See, it is echo. Bad joke, I know. Comments. Okay. When you're doing more complex code, it is a very good idea to have comments, just because you're saving the people that come after you. If you're really tired and you're like, hey, yeah, sure, I'm going to remember what I did tomorrow, when I haven't had any sleep for the last 36 hours, you won't. I can guarantee that. I've done this before. Sometimes it's best to write a thing about this brilliant idea that you had and write a comment in there, rather than forgetting what you were. Yeah, I was exactly. And I've actually seen comments like that when I've been doing peer review. I'm very sorry, I was tired. Please double read this, stuff like that. So they're used so you can have others understand your code, remind yourself what you did, and leave out some parts of your code. So sometimes you're like, hey, this is what I originally was going to try to do, but it's just not working. But I might want to try to use this little chunk of code later. And you can comment out that section. So this is a single line comment. You can do this for a single line comment. And then if you have, like, say, several of them, you do this. That is your slash asterisk. And you see how it pops up in green? In fact, I don't remember if Visual Studio is green, but most of them you'll see green. Let me see that. And you can see doesn't show up over here, but because it's commented out. That actually sounds like some of the stuff my friends and I would put in there to make each other laugh. Just when you're doing peer review of tons and tons of code, you have to do things to make each other laugh. So yes, I can see that. But yeah, so that's all sorts of ways to comment things out. And yes, I've seen that too. Single line comments, just your dash or your slash, and then here's where they do at the end of the line. Stop jumping on me, guys. I'm sorry. And this is, they've taken this and commented it out. So if we decide, oh, we want to use that later, we just take those 2 slashes out. And there it works. And then we go, oh, okay, no. We want to do that back the way it was. Boom, it's commented back out. So it's actually quite easy to do that. This is that multi-line comment, which is really nice. I prefer multi-line comments because usually it's not just one line of stuff that I have to. Yeah, exactly. Good luck figuring out what I was trying to do after I drank 3 Red Bulls and an entire bag of Cheetos and then face planted on my keyboard. Yes. Yes, stuff like that. But I like the multiple line because a lot of times I'll have like a chunk of code that I'm working on, but you know, I don't want to mess up the other parts of the page, but it's something, you know, that I want to possibly change things to. So I'll do the multi-line so I can come back and work on it later. Here's your ignore comments in the middle of code, which I do not like to do, but it is possible. I think it's really good way to mess stuff up. So I try not to do that unless it's for testing reasons, because more often that, yeah, exactly. That's why I try not to do anything where you drink that many, you know, public service warning here. From someone who had a almost 3-day can energy drink habit when I was doing 12-hour shifts. It can mess up your health. So beware. My brother-in-law, my former brother-in-law, luckily he's still my friend, he's a pretty cool guy, was an EMT for the Army. And he told me a story of a soldier that was trying to push himself too hard and was trying to move his entire family up to where he was located within a 2-week period. And instead of doing proper planning, he just pounded energy drinks. And by the time he had finished this, he ended up with an arrhythmia. So they really, really, really can be bad for you. So take into account that you can really hurt yourself with some of those. So just be careful. Yeah, and this guy actually ended up with a permanent arrhythmia because he was pounding. He lost count of how many a day for a solid 2-week period. So it actually got him booted out of the service because he was no longer able to do the physicals. So yeah, it can, as some people, they could go along and be fine. Some people, it can do all sorts of things. But I also have a friend that was a, what do you call it, a pharmacologist. And she decided to take some of those and do run them through a mass spectrometer. And she said, yeah, here's the stuff that's on the label, but do you see all these other points over here? I have no idea what they are, and they aren't even listed on the can. So it made me very nervous. And that was when I started to taper off and I don't drink them anymore. Yeah.
My story is sort of, mine has nothing to do with what was on the can. It was just we were a small section in the Army, and I had to pull a night detail or like a night duty overnight. And normally what's supposed to happen is you get relieved the next morning and you don't have to do PT or anything like that. Instead, our first sergeant wanted everyone there for PT. So my NCO was like, "Don't worry, you won't have to do PT. Just show up in PTs, and you'll be there for formation and roll call, and then we'll send you home." And I was like, "All right." So I show up and I start to like do that, and they're like, "All right, go." And I start to walk like it was almost like a gymnasium area. So I got up and I started to walk. And where are you going, soldier? uh I'm leaving first sergeant. I was up all night. No, we're going on a run. And I had
Oh my
literally been
gosh.
up the last uh 26 hours
Oh my
with
gosh.
and I was on like 4 energy drinks at that point. And like
Yeah,
I
I
remember
can
making
believe
it, I remember making it through the run, and then we're standing listening to him blather on about something, and I wake up and an EMT's wrapping a cuff around my arm.
I can believe it. I've seen that
Yeah.
happen. I mean, I've seen that happen too, because I've worked with people from all sorts of other areas, and I worked in for about a year and a half. I worked in a clean room here. It was called AMI Semiconductor. It's been bought several times. Went to On Semiconductor. I think it's actually been bought again, but they did those 12-hour shifts. So, and I worked the back of the weekend. So I did 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Saturday, Sunday. No, it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And yeah. So you know what I'm talking about. So you find out very quickly if you're going to be claustrophobic when you put on one of those suits and you have to put the mask and everything else on. But you also find out that 12-hour shifts suck. So, and that I feel for anybody that's like in the police, or there's a lot of those. Yeah, a lot of people, they had people in our, but part of our training, like the last day, part of our training was to put the suit on just to see if you would freak out. Yeah. So, but it was kind of a bad environment anyway, for different reasons, but I met some really cool people through it. So, I mean, I don't really. Right, yeah, nursing people. That's another place they love to do 12-hour. I always thought it was weird that they do 12-hour shifts for the people that they really should be letting sleep, like cops and people like that. I'm like, I mean, I kind of get it, but at the same time, shouldn't we be letting them sleep? Anyway, I got us off on a tangent. So be careful how much you drink when it comes to caffeine and all sorts of things like that. So comments we just went over. Now we're going to talk about some variables. So when you create variables, it's called declaring variables in PHP. That's when you use our fancy little $sign. So in PHP, variable starts with the $sign followed by the name of the variable. So here we're saying the variable is X, and we're setting that variable X. We're saying it is the number 5. And on this one, this one, Y is equal to John. I know this doesn't probably make as much sense right now, but when you're doing something like this, this is just the simple, you reset X to 5, Y to John, and then say echo X, and then echo Y. Then what it does, it's like doing the hello world. It says, okay, we're going to echo and print out basically X. And okay, let's look up here. What did we declare X as? Oh, there it is, 5. Then we're going to echo a space, because if you do not do this part right here, here, let me show you what happens. That just crams them together. So if you have to put something, oops. I did not copy that. Anyway, you have to put something between them, or otherwise they get crammed in there. So whenever you do that echo, remember it's like you're saying print out or view. That's what's going out there. So you've declared those, and then you're saying, okay, let's set this out there. Let's put a space between them, and then let's set the next one out. Does that make sense? Okay. Now you can get a lot more complicated, as we'll see. So when you assign text to a variable, you have to put quotes around it. Yeah, it's a little bit like JavaScript. I think that's why people, why it said you need to know JavaScript. You don't really need to know JavaScript. You just need to be aware that JavaScript can run with this. So Unlike other programming languages, it has no command for declaring variable, sorry. It's created the moment you assign a value to that variable. So if you think of variables, they are containers for storing data. That's the easiest way to look at it. So a variable can have a short name like X and Y, or a descriptive name. Now here's when you run into some very interesting issues. Remember, when you're doing these variables, one of the fastest ways to mess up is to declare the name and spell it wrong, and then try to use the name the correct spelling later on when you try to echo it. So double check what you set them to, because it doesn't care what you name them. It cares how you try to reach back to that. So here's some rules. You have to start with the $sign, followed by the name of the variable. The variable name must start with a letter or the underscore character. The variable name cannot start with a number. The variable name can only contain alphanumeric characters and underscores. And variable names are case sensitive. So age and age are two different variables. That's one of the places where it's going to matter. Because what you're doing, what you're doing is creating a pointer almost, if you think about it that way. So if you say age and age, I'm just saying that caps lock age. They can be two different things. I wouldn't do that because it can get really confusing for the person reading it. Technically, those are two different things. Yep. I wouldn't do that, but you can technically do that if you want to be a jerk about it. So just remember that. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have told you that. You're gonna have some interesting stuff come out now. Okay, then there's what's called output variables. And these are those echo statements where we output data to the screen. So this next one will show how to output text. So there's our $sign, and we called it txt, and we're setting it to w3schools.com, and then echo I love, and then there's your variable, and then the rest of it. So that's what comes out. So does that little snippet make sense to everybody? Okay, good. And this one, technically, it will put the same output as the above. It's just that you're putting separators, they're visual separators in there so that you can see. Yeah, you can do an echo nope. You can name things nope if you want to. That's up to you. But this dot, these periods, you'll start to see people put stuff like that in when you have multiple. Priceless echo cope. Okay. Yeah, you won the award for today. That's a good throwback. So anyway, they put the periods in there, and as you see longer and longer statements, that's just a visual breakup so that you can see things a little bit easier. And this is math. Yes, you can do math. So we're saying variable X is equal to 5, variable Y is equal to 4, and then we want to echo out X plus Y, and that is 9. So yes, we are now adding math to programming just to be more fun. So it's a loosely typed language. So in the ones above, you didn't have to tell PHP which data type the variable was. It automatically associates a data type to the variable depending on the value. Since the data types are not set in a strict sense, you can do things like adding a string to an integer without causing an error. And PHP 7, type declarations were added, and it gives you an option to specify the data type expected when declaring a function. And by enabling strict requirements, it will throw a fatal error on a type mismatch. So this just helps you to make sure that you have your inputs and things like that more strictly defined. So on this one, it's saying, okay, this is an integer, this is a string, and then it shows it there as well. And these are the data types that PHP supports. So the first two, strings and integers. So strings are basically just types of stuff in between your quote marks. That's a string. An integer is a number, a float, or as a floating point number, or called a double. There's booleans, arrays, objects, null, and resources. You can use what's called a var dump, which returns the data type of the value. So if we're not sure what this is, you type in var dump and then put parentheses around it, and it'll say, oh, okay, this up here, this is an integer. So if you're not altogether sure what this is, I mean, this is super simple, but if you're not sure what it is, you can put var dump and it'll say what variable, what it is. So here, it's doing a var dump on these different types. And we'll say, okay, so this one's an integer, this one's a string, this one is a float because it's got your decimal place. Booleans are those ones and twos, the true and false. That's what they're talking about here. An array, those are the ones where you have multiple things set. So that's what this one is right here. And then var dump null. So does that, I'm sure that I'm already starting to overload your brain. Don't worry, we're almost done for the day. It's kind of cool when you think of what you can do with it, but at the same time, it can be extremely overwhelming when you think of how much you can do with it. So yes, it can be very difficult. So assigning a string to a variable. To assign a string to a variable is done with the variable name followed by the equal sign and then just your quotes. That's what it's talking about with a string. And so that's our John right here. If you want to do multiple values, say that you have one string, but you have multiple things that you want set to that. So in this one, X, Y, and Z, they are all fruit. So if you want to echo all of them, you get fruit, fruit, fruit.
So wait, does this mean like, I don't remember where it was, but there was like a joke or something from when I was younger, and it was 2 + 2 does not equal 4. 2 + 2 equals fish.
You can technically in here, if you said it right. Yep.
Wow.
And then variable scope. They can be, variables can be declared anywhere. We have the local, global, and static. The variable declared outside the global and local scopes. A variable declared outside the function has a global scope and can only be accessed outside of a function. So let me show you here. Those are the ones where you have them inside and outside the brackets. So the variable X inside, and that's where it gets confusing. When you're trying to read through stuff, is how many different brackets and things can be thrown in there. So on this one, the global, you only can access when it's outside of those little things. And then when a variable is declared within a function, that is a local scope. So show you here, local scope, that's inside these little brackets. Okay. So global, outside, local, inside. So, I mean, it seems like it should be easy, but I can guarantee. Yeah. Echo brain hurdy. Yes. Right. So this is actually where we're going to stop, is we're going to stop with the global and local. Because I think that is, any further past that will probably make your brain go kaboom. So you can see that they just have different examples, and there's the global, local. Basically, what I want you to remember, because I can guarantee your brain's already starting to rinse and repeat on some of this. Remember global outside, local inside. That's all I want you to remember for right now, okay? So there's no quiz today because iframe PHP. Yes, actually you can do that, Jeff. Yes. So there's no quiz for today because it was kind of a short week for you guys. We went through the assignment. That doesn't mean there won't be one tomorrow, so just be aware. So we went through the assignment. You can always go back and reference the video so you can see the assignment. Don't forget your slide up here, programming cookbook. And if you're having problems with those arrays and here's your language basics. The stuff that we were just talking about. There's some more examples right there. I'm not saying go look at it right now. In fact, I'm saying right now, we should stop the lecture and then talk about homework. So before I stop the lecture, are there any questions about the pieces that we talked about with this right now? Nope, I blew everyone's brain up. Okay, all right, I'm going to stop the lecture here and we'll talk about homework.